Hello everyone, this is Vesper HBT. Was put forth to me a little bit of a challenge, so I wanted to take on to that. It was sent to me through email that I use quote-unquote cool tools like CNC machines and automated presses to make my motor, and that a common person with basic tools wouldn't be able to make the motor at all. One of the main primary focuses was the yellow rings that I used to mount my coils, that those were impossible to make with basic hand tools, so that a basic person couldn't build my motor. And I wanted to prove that it could be done, so I accepted that challenge. I want to talk about safety. I do not take responsibility for any injuries or anything that you're about to see in this video. This is merely to show that it can be made with basic tools, and that you do this at your complete and full own risk while doing this. But I recommend that you buy the correct tools to do this process, and that you have more than a basic understanding of those tools to start this project. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now. Just wanted to show you basically what we have here. This right here, little piece of equipment, is something that I hand built just today, just for this challenge, and I tested it to make sure it would work. Basically, what you have is, you have behind here, you have a skill saw. Everyone has a skill saw. Now, what I would use in place of this device is actually a table saw, or even a routing machine. If you have a CNC machine, that's what I use, because that's what I have at my shop. It's a 4-axis CNC machine. But what this does is, you can see that the blade comes through here. There's no power, so this is completely turned off right now. And so the blade comes through. This is not the correct blade for plastic. You would want to use the correct blade for plastic. I'm merely showing this to show you that this is possible, and I have actually cut a disc with this to show that it would work. And so this right here is the straight edge. It's set a gap away from the blade so that this dimension here is going to accept the size of the finished disc. So the finished disc would be this wide here, and so as you can see, it fits right there next to the blade like this. Now, when you set your blade for this depth, you want to make sure that it is barely coming through the material, and hopefully you can see that. Just barely coming through the material, and that's so that the blade has less of a chance to come into contact with you. Make sure that all of your guards and everything are in place for all your saws and equipment. How this would work is, I'll show you on the main section here. Basically, you would have your tube, and you would slide that down here all the way to the base, to where it is going to be tied up against the board on this side, and then you would simply turn this into the feed direction of the blade. Keep in mind that you want to make sure that everything is tied down and tightened. I just have the skill saw mounted inside of a vise right now just to show you how that would work. But you could build this completely on a flat tabletop, and basically, essentially what you've made is your own table saw with using a skill saw. I built one of these back in high school many years ago as just an experiment to do, so I did have a rough knowledge of how to make this. But that's basically this part of it, and so you would cut your disc. When you cut your disc using this, however, I'm going to let this come into focus, you're going to see that it's very uneven as far as what the cut looks like, and that is not good enough for anything that we are doing. So with that being said, that's our cut that came actually off of this machine. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this off the desktop for a minute here while we're working here, and I want to show you kind of the next processes in drilling the holes and things. So I'm going to go ahead and move this off. Excuse me. Okay, so now what you can see in this, I'm going to just bring this into focus here a little bit more right here. what you can see I drew out here on my plywood is the internal of our disc. Now how you can cut these discs is if you think about this as a flat sheet, okay, that would be an inch thick if you need it to be. If you're not going to cut it from a tube, you wouldn't need to cut it from a tube. Okay, this is just one that I milled out using a lathe and CNC machine. If you don't have that, you can get just a sheet of material that is the proper thickness for what you want to use, and you would go ahead and use two different hole saws. One hole saw you would cut the outer dimension first, and then one hole saw you would cut the inner dimension. And those dimensions are going to be relative to your actual rotor that you're going to have in here. So there are two ways to cut these yellow discs. And once you get them cut, it's pretty much easy after that. Okay, so we're going to map out exactly the size of our hole. And I set it so that the interior dimension is the same as what our ring is. Okay, and we find the center basically really easily. I go from a static point on the board, and then I just make sure everything is squared off from there. So I'm going to make a square line here and a square line here to start out with for this design. And then I'm going to go square to parallel and square to parallel. And that gives us all of our dimensions for where we're going to mark all of our holes. Okay? So that's pretty easy. And then off of this, if you look down here on the side, you're going to see that I ran the lines off. What you'll do is you will mark the outside of your ring right where that is. Okay? And so that's pretty easy. So you just mark that. Okay? And then what you'll do is you'll rotate this up, and you would have a mark there. And then from that mark, you will use a square on the side of your disc. As such, and then you would scribe that line straight across, and that way that your line is square and parallel to your disc. Okay? So I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we can see that line. Alright, and then you would take your tape measure, and for our purposes we're not going to go center on this, and I illustrate that on my other motor, motor video, but you can say that we're an inch wide here, and then what we'd do is find the center of the ring and mark that for our upper and lower radius holes, and then we would drill those through. And how I do that is, of course, we would measure, and I'm just going to, for our instance, put a mark there, just so that we can see that, just like this. And then we would take our awl, or our center punch, and we would set that into the center of that hole, and we would mark that hole. After we mark that hole, then we would use our Forstner bit. It works excellent on plastic. And we would set that in the center of that hole, and we would drill that all the way through. And we would use a drill press for that, or we can use a handheld drill as well. Now, once we had the hole drilled, then we would just go ahead and mark out for the rest of our holes all the way around. Our axis holes would be the top and bottom hole, and then we would cut for our 3 coil holes on each side. So that, in essence, would give us this configuration. So you can see how that will work, and then you can see our coil sticking through up there at the top. I'll show another video for how to sand and get the finishing taken care of. But this is it for this video, and look for the next video. Thank you.